This is a continuation of the video lesson on the syntax for symbolic logic. So far, we've introduced simple sentences and we've introduced sentences created using the tilde operator. The fourth rule for our formal language of symbolic logic employs the dot operator.
So the way that we form sentences with tilde is that we take one sentence and we create a new sentence out of it. The rule for forming new sentences with the dot is going to take two inputs. So the dot's going to be a binary operator, whereas the tilde was a unary operator. So rule 4 of our system says that if P and Q are any two sentences, P followed by the dot, the symbol dot, and then followed by Q with parentheses around it is a sentence. So we now have a construction process for the dot, just like we had a construction process for the tilde. This time, the form of our construction process takes two sentences, P and Q, and we write left parenthesis, whatever P is, and then the dot, and then whatever Q is, followed by a right parenthesis. So, for example, we can take our two sentences to be just A and B, and then we put those together, we're going to get A dot B in parentheses. Now, we're going to do the exact same thing that we did with the tilde rule. Remember, we used a sentence that came from the tilde rule and then put that into the tilde construction process again. Let's do the same thing with this dot process. We take what we just got, A dot B in parentheses, and we're going to use that as one of our sentences in the construction process. So we're substituting in for P now A dot B in parentheses, because that's a sentence. And let's pick our Q to be C, so that we put those two sentences together, and we're going to put A dot B, and then put dot C, and enclose the whole thing in parentheses again. So we now have a sentence A dot B in parentheses, and we have another sentence with parenthesis, parenthesis, A dot B, close parenthesis, dot C, close parenthesis. Now let's play around with this construction process idea a little bit further and make some more sentences. We're allowed to substitute in any sentence whatsoever for P and any sentence whatsoever for Q. So I can choose A dot B to be one sentence, and then the other sentence can be B. It doesn't matter that there's overlap between those sentences. It makes absolutely no difference. So what I get in that case, I get A dot B in parentheses, dot B in parentheses. I can take a sentence involving tilde and substitute that into this process. So I can choose one of the sentences to be tilde A, and then the other sentence to be B dot C in parentheses. And then I'm going to get this expression. Now don't forget, we still have the other construction process, the tilde construction process, which still says you can take any sentence P and put a tilde on the left of it and create a new sentence. So I can take any of these sentences, for example the last one, and put a tilde on the left of that, and that will be a sentence too. Now let's continue on looking at expressions and asking if they're sentences. We now have A dot B is a sentence. A dot B in parentheses dot C is a sentence. Expressions 1, 2, and 3 we've already said were sentences. How about this expression? Yes, that's a sentence. And what if I take 4 and just put a tilde on the left of it? According to the tilde rule, that's a sentence too. What about this expression? Yes, I put a tilde on the left of something that's previously a sentence. And now, what about expression 7? According to our official rules, when sentences are combined using the dot, they have parentheses around them. So technically, this should look like 1, but you can see that there's a lot of parentheses flying around in this system. We got parentheses all over the place. And sometimes that doesn't make our expressions more readable. It actually makes them more difficult to read. So we're going to introduce a convention of having a shortened form where we simply delete parentheses if they're on the very outside. So if there's a parenthesis on the extreme left and a parenthesis on the extreme right with nothing outside of them, we'll simply delete those parentheses and call that a shortened form. So now we've got an expression like this, which we're calling a sentence, although it's in shortened form. An expression like this. We still have expressions like 10, where there's a tilde on the outside of parentheses. So we cannot delete those parentheses. And the left parenthesis is not on the extreme left of the expression. So this is a sentence, and those parentheses need to be there. We can have a sentence like 11 with the parenthetical expression on the left, and the assumed parentheses are deleted. In number 12, we have a tilde on the left of the A. That tilde is assumed to apply to the A. And it's assumed that there's a deleted left parenthesis on the left side of the tilde, and another one on the extreme right side of the expression. So 12 is another sentence, but in shortened form. And what about our old friend A tilde B? Is that now a sentence? Well, there was nothing in the rules that said you could put a tilde between two sentences. So tilde goes on the left side of a complete sentence to form a new sentence. So this is still not a sentence. A tilde B is not a sentence. And how about just AB? This is still not a sentence in our system. There's no rule that tells you can just write two sentences next to each other and have a sentence. So although A is a sentence and B is a sentence, AB, not a sentence. So now we've got the rule for tilde, which makes a sentence out of one previously existing sentence, and we've got the rule for dot, which builds a new sentence out of two previously existing sentences. The rest of the rules for our system are exactly similar to the dot rule. They will introduce new sentences from two previously existing sentences with the remaining three operators. So we're going to have a rule that tells you to build sentences with the wedge that looks exactly like the rule for dot, except with wedge instead of dot. And the same with the arrow, and the same with the double arrow.
And so what we have effectively done with rules 5, 6, and 7 is that we have introduced more sentences that look very similar to the sentences produced with the dot rule, except with different operators. So for example, we can now have a sentence like this, A wedge B, a sentence like tilde, and then in parentheses, A wedge B, a sentence with that sentence on the left of an arrow, remember that's the same as the horseshoe, and B on the right, or a sentence with A on the left and tilde B dot C on the right with the double arrow in the middle, and a number of other similar sentences. And in fact, an infinite number of similar sentences. There's one more concept about this system that we can discuss, which is purely syntactic, and that is the idea of the main operator of a sentence. Any sentence that has any operator at all has a main operator. There are a couple of different ways you can think of the main operator. To me, the most fundamental way of thinking of the main operator is that it's the final operator introduced in the construction process for the sentence. Recall that I was suggesting we think of each of those syntax rules as introducing a construction process. And if you imagine a sentence being produced by successive construction processes, then the final construction process for that sentence introduced the main operator. A more practical way of thinking of the main operator is that it's always going to be one of two things. It will either be the leftmost tilde outside of all parentheses in long form, that is, including the deleted parentheses. So it has to be a tilde on the outside of everything. Or else it will be whatever binary operator is not enclosed within any paired parentheses in shortened form. That is to say, if you have deleted parentheses on the very outside, then the binary operator that's not inside of any paired parentheses would be that operator. So take a look at some examples and see if you can tell what the main operator is. In this sentence, we have a tilde on the outside of all the parentheses, including deleted parentheses. There's no deleted parenthesis on the left side of that tilde. So that is the main operator of this sentence, that tilde. Here's a sentence that has a number of parenthetical groups inside of it. It would actually be really difficult to describe, or maybe just tedious more than difficult to describe, how it is that you pair up parentheses in this sentence. But I think that we're all used to pairing up parentheses, so we can see that the parenthesis on the left of the B and on the right of the C, those pair up. And then the parenthesis outside of that one pairs with the one on the right side of the D. And then we have these brackets on the left side of the A and outside of on the very right. I didn't introduce brackets as an official part of the system, but I think you can see how it's helpful to unofficially use brackets sometimes. And once again, there is no unwritten parenthesis or brackets unofficially on the left side on the extreme left side of this expression. These two tildes are on the outside of all the parenthetical groups. And so this tilde, the first one, is the main operator. In the expression A wedge B, wedge is the main operator. And what is the main operator in this expression? Hopefully you can see that it's this one. So to sum things up here, what I've done is to explain the syntax of the system we'll be using to you in a somewhat pedantic way. But I have some reasons for choosing to have been so pedantic with this description. I think it's going to help you when you're trying to work with this system to have seen how the syntax can operate on a level completely independent of assigning any meaning to anything. And in addition to that, hopefully this will prevent you from making some of the syntax errors that we discussed, such as putting tilde between two sentences, or just combining two letters without an operator between them. So again, we've got our alphabet, the standard one included in the Hurley textbook, with the high dot, the horseshoe, and the triple bar. And I think it's going to come in handy for us to have a standardized ASCII alternative where we'll simply use the period, the arrow, and the double arrow. And the other component of our syntax is the rules that generate sentences of our system. And we also looked at some examples of sentences that get generated by this system, and hopefully you can identify the main operator of any sentence of the system at this point. Next time I'll start to explain how the semantics of the system works.